Good morning, Leverage WP. This morning, I'm going to be migrating a client website called hopefarmshtx.org from my SiteGround Cloud Hosting account over to my GridPane self-managed WordPress account where I do all my hosting now. So I'm going to compile a few different pieces of information and allow you to look over my shoulder to see what are the needed things to migrate this website from one host to another without any downtime at all and without the client even noticing anything has changed. So let me share my screen and let's take a look at this website. First of all, here I'm logged into hopefarmshtx.org. To the WP admin area. And in another tab here, I have the website open so that we can see what we have going on. So here in my Chrome browser, I can see that the website's up and working. It has quite a few pages. And there are a few things I want to compile as far as information before I get started here. The first thing I'll do is I just want to make sure I know where this site actually is. And whether there's email attached to it at all, and what the domain name setup is like for this website. And so one of the first things that I rely on inside my Chrome browser is an extension here called DNS Lytics IP Assistant. It's called IP Address and Domain Information Extension at the Chrome Web Store. It's a Chrome browser extension. You can find it by looking up IP address or something like that. DNS Lytics is the company. You can get to the extensions in Chrome by going up to the settings, the three dots up here, and then under More Tools, opening up extensions. And that'll open a tab with all the extensions that you do have, and I have this one installed over here. I can get the details from it, etc. But if you want to find extensions, you can go over here and you can open Chrome Web Store, and then you can find, IP address. I'll show you what I use this extension for, but this one right here, IP address and domain information, is the one that I have installed, and it's a great extension for doing this. I can look at a website that on the internet here, and this is one that I know that I'm hosting, but I can find out some information, a few things using this extension. So if I open up the IP extension right here, and this is just the little shortcut. If you open the puzzle piece right here in your Chrome browser, you can open what extensions are pinned to the top here. And so that's how you control that. Like, for example, vidIQ Vision, if you just hit this pin, it will pin that icon to the top, or you can remove certain ones if you want to, etc. And so you can use that little puzzle piece icon to arrange this for yourself. So I open the IP address and look up utility here in the Chrome browser. One thing I can see is the IP address where this server, where the domain is pointing traffic for this. And I know that this IP address is associated with my SiteGround account. So if I scroll a little bit lower, I can see a location. I can see other domains that are hosted at this IP address. And as I look down here, you can see that it's Google Cloud. But I don't really have a reference in this information to SiteGround here. Another thing you can do is look under domain and see what information out of the public knowledge it can gather here. It shows there's an A record in the DNS records here pointing to this IP address. And it also says that the name servers are being used at siteground.net. So that gives you an idea. Also, with the MX records, these are mail exchanger records. I know that this record here is associated with hosting email at SiteGround. And so I want to make sure that I just know what's happening here at the website. And the domain name itself, and whether there's email addresses to migrate or not, so I don't lose anything. And so if I just pull up the, I'm going to pull up my iPad to just do a little diagramming here. What we're doing is a migration of this website, hopefarmshtx.org, from SiteGround to GridPane. And there are a few different things we want to consider. First of all, the website itself. What's involved in the website? And there's two parts that we'll look at, making sure that we migrate when we do the actual site migration. from one host to another. And then within email, we want to know whether there are any MX records, which we just looked at on the IP address lookup right there, and whether there are any email addresses. And then as far as the domain name, we want to know whether there are DNS records involved and what those are. And we also want to know whether there are name servers being used so that we can make a proper setup moving forward. As far as email, like I just mentioned, we just want to know if there's any addresses, email addresses, and where they are being hosted. And so you point a domain's email address using MX records. And so we'll look that up in the DNS records when we look at the domain name, where the domain's registered, and how it's pointing traffic when people look up that domain name to the host, etc. And then for the website, there's two parts to that as well. On the website, we want to make sure we're dealing with the website files, which would be the WordPress files, the media folder where any images are hosted, as well as themes and plugins that are being used within the WordPress installation. So there's files, and then there's also the database. So I want to know what all these things are. Let me just get this out of the way to make this a little bit neater. But as far as what we're looking at, we want to look at the files in the database and migrate those for the website. As far as email, we want to make sure that we know of any email addresses that are hosted at this domain name, hopefarmshtx.org, and how they're hosted, where they're hosted, if they're at the website hosting itself or not, and how the MX records are pointed at the DNS records here for the domain name. And finally, the domain name connects everything together, so we want to know whether it's using name servers or DNS records, and if so, where is the DNS hosted? And so let's take a look for hopefarmshtx.org. In my client-facing business, I will often not remember where things are hosted. Of course, I have notes that I keep about different client sites and where all my information is, but I just like to make sure and get the most current information by looking this up directly right before I'm about to make any changes. And so one thing I can see is that there's A records pointing to this IP address, and there's name servers pointing to SiteGround.net. Now, if I look over at my SiteGround account, I'm logged in and I'm looking at this hosting account that I have in my SiteGround Cloud Hosting account. And I can see that there is some disk space used. This IP address is one thing I can verify that matches 35208. That matches over here what I was seeing with the IP lookup. And so that's 35208.8553. Yeah. So this website is pointed at this SiteGround hosting with potentially these name servers right here. And so one thing I did make some notes on in my client notes is that this client hosts their own domain name, and they host the domain name at register.com. And if I go back over to the website, and let's take a look at it one more time, this is where I did have notes here that at register.com they're hosting the domain. But if again I use this IP lookup tool, if I look under the domain tab, not only can I see what the DNS records are, but there's a public information whois record. Now, this is you can have private registration so that things like the address, phone number, name of the technical and registrant contact information is redacted for privacy. Even so, I can tell up here that the whois server is register.com, and I can see the registrar URL is register.com. So depending on whether I'm registering my domains like I do now with Cloudflare, you might have client sites that want to or already have their domain names registered through another registrar like register.com or Network Solutions or Namecheap, or often I'll have clients registering with GoDaddy because it's easy to find and easy to use. In this case, instead of transferring the client's domain name to my own registration at Cloudflare, I've kept it at their own registration. They paid for it for multiple years, and they're responsible for keeping it live and keeping it updated with their payment information. And so I know that it's at register.com. Now, I do have the client's login information at register.com. So let's take a look. Right here at register.com, I've logged in and I've navigated to this domain name, and I'm looking at the domain overview. It says here that it renews in a few years from now, so we're just going to leave it like this. But I can see that it says connected to custom name servers. And if I go down here under Advanced Tools at Register, I can see that the name servers that I'm using are these NS1 and NS2. This is the previous name servers for SiteGround. This stands for SiteGround VPS, Virtual Private Server.net. I can also use these other name servers that they suggest I use now, ns1.siteground.net. But I'm going to be setting up and moving away from SiteGround. And what I have in my GridPane account, at GridPane, I have my sites set up and I can host many more sites for less money than I used to be able to at my SiteGround Cloud Hosting account here. And with GridPane, I can connect to Cloudflare. Now, Cloudflare is a DNS provider, and now they're also a registrar where you can register domain names with Cloudflare, and they don't mark them up at all. For example, at GoDaddy.com, you can register .com domain names for a little under $20 per year. But registering a .com domain name at Cloudflare is only something like $8.24. They don't mark it up at all. The ICANN registration authority that manages domain names and registrations, it has a set cost price, which is a little over $8 right now for a .com domain name. And so I've started to transfer all my domain name registrations to Cloudflare. But even if I don't have the domain name registered here, I can point it to Cloudflare using these name servers. And so to begin, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to point the name servers from register.com to Cloudflare without the site changing at all and without the site going down. You can see as I do this, and I'll explain how it works as we go. There's a few things that will be changing in the background that don't affect the live site. They just change the way traffic is routed to that same server. So for now, all I'm going to change is adding a website to my Cloudflare account by clicking add a site here and putting in the domain name. So I'll just go actually right over to here and click copy, and I'll paste that in here. Now at Cloudflare, you don't have the protocol, the HTTPS. So I'm just going to make sure it's spelled correctly, hopefarmshtx.org, and click add site. Now what Cloudflare does here is they'll go out and they'll look for the DNS records that are already in place so that they can start traffic moving through Cloudflare, and instead of going directly to SiteGround, it'll have the same DNS records, and we can control the DNS here at Cloudflare. And so that's a free service. Cloudflare's free level is excellent for DNS and DNS management. The reason I'm doing it this way is because then you have instant propagation across the internet for changes in hosting, changes in email systems. So you don't have to wait the 24 to 48 hours that less connected service providers have. And so now this has come up, reviewing your DNS records, I can see that these are all the ones that came from the DNS inside of SiteGround. I can verify that this is the correct IP address, right? That's the 35208. And there's 3 MX records. One of the things that I discovered in looking at this is I don't really have to worry about mail or email because we don't have email addresses here anyway. But let's continue with this. So I can see that these are the DNS records happening at SiteGround. So if I go over to SiteGround, let's just go ahead and verify this. If I look under domain name, I can look at DNS zone editor, and because the name servers are being pointed from register.com over to SiteGround here, SiteGround is the manager of the DNS records, and that's the domain name service. It points the domain and traffic going through this domain name to the appropriate places for website use with A records and CNAME records, and the appropriate place for email if we had email set up with these MX records. And these text records and other things like this DKIM and SPF records are verifications for email and things like that. And so I can see that these are all, looks like all the same correct records that match the ones that Cloudflare found. And all it's going to do is we're going to change the name servers at Cloudflare's recommendation to point from register.com instead of directly to SiteGround. They're going to go through Cloudflare and then point to SiteGround in this way, in the same way. So in that way, we're going to change the DNS control and bring the DNS control from SiteGround here to one level higher up at Cloudflare. That will enable us later when we do move the site and migrate it from SiteGround, here over to GridPane hosting, then we can do that again in a seamless way where no one will notice that the site's in a different place. It's just an exact copy on a different server with no downtime at all. That's the benefit of doing it this way, and using Cloudflare for your DNS means that you don't have to wait 24 to 48 hours, but it's instant. And so looking back at Cloudflare here, I also wanted to show you that I did verify that under email accounts, no results. We don't have any email set up for hopefarmshtx.org. So this will be a little more of a simple migration where I don't have to worry about moving or pointing email traffic to the correct email hosting. We just don't have any email hosted at this domain at all. And so back at Cloudflare, I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And the thing it wants us to do is to change the name servers. And now that Cloudflare remembers the correct DNS records, I can be assured that changing these name servers at register won't break the website. As long as register will change these and instantly have them change without going back to some kind of parking name servers first, then we'll have no downtime with the website. And so what I'll do is go over to, I want to change the name servers from here that register has to here, Cloudflare's name servers. So I'll just click to copy, and that's the first one, the marty.ns.cloudflare.com. And I'll go back to register.com here, and I'm going to click manage. And I just want to change these name servers to Cloudflare as the number one, and then the second one is Nora at Cloudflare. Oops. And I'll change this one. And then I'm going to click save. Unable to set name servers. Now, this has happened to me before, and I think it's happened with register.com itself. Try later or call customer support. The thing that I've had to do in the past is to restore to the default name servers first, and then I'm able to add these name servers in. And unfortunately, and this is why I don't like using some domain registrars that don't quite work as well as Cloudflare does. GoDaddy is, again, another good name, domain name registrar where they have a fast connection to the domain name system and the DNS, and their changes are instantly done and automatically done too. So you can do this kind of thing without having a website go down. But if I go back to the screen here, what I'm going to have to do is revert to the defaults first, and then I can add these new name servers. And so it's likely going to have the website itself go down for just a minute or two while this change happens. And remember, I can always go back to these two name servers at SiteGround. If I go back to the dashboard itself, if I go back to these name servers or even those SGVPS name servers that we had here, that will instantly restore the site at SiteGround in case I have a problem here as we move forward. And so the first thing I'm going to do is go to register, and I'm going to just restore to defaults first. I'm going to revert back. Okay, so this is a request that the name server's change has been submitted. And so I can just kind of refresh this page. I'm looking at the hopefarmshtx.org. They can't process my request at this time. Great. So I'd probably need to just log back in. I just got logged out after a period of time to register.com using my client's account. And let me log back in. All right. Now going to domain names. And I want to move down to the Hope Farms HTX domain. And now let's see what happens. It still thinks that it's on the SGVPS, so I think I have to give this a little bit of time, and I'll need to pause the video here while this catches up. It's connected to custom name servers, right? And so it opens that up. And if I click manage, let's see. I already clicked restore to defaults, so I think I just have to wait and see. Let's just do a cringy little refresh here and see. It's still pointing to the SiteGround IP address here, and so we just have to wait for register.com to listen and find the change that we made to the website name servers back to the default register.com name servers, and then at that point I'll be able to add the new Cloudflare name servers that were indicated. So I'll pause the video here and come back when that change has propagated. Okay, so that worked out quickly, all on its own. If you remember, we were back at register.com, and under hopefarmshtx.org, under advanced tools, when I wanted to go and manage and change the revert to defaults, it said, okay, it was going to do that. And as soon as I did that, I was able to go back into this same place. And this time, when I wanted to replace name servers 1 and 2 with the ones from Cloudflare, the Marty and the Nora name servers that point to Cloudflare, it was able to go ahead and make that change. And I clicked save. And then it was just a minute or so later that I got a notification via email, and also in the Cloudflare account section for hopefarmshtx.org that it said, great news, Cloudflare is now protecting your site. And so if I look at Cloudflare under DNS, you'll see that it has all the DNS records that it had went and detected when the DNS was being managed by SiteGround over here. But now the same result is happening with website traffic, but it's going through Cloudflare as my DNS provider. And Cloudflare also offers, even in their free tier, a lot of really advanced and beneficial services like a CDN and worldwide fast loading of websites. And there's also some DDoS attack protection and everything. So I really recommend Cloudflare for both DNS management in their free tier, as well as a domain registrar, which I'll make some more tutorials about that in the future. They're a new registered registrar, like I mentioned, and they don't mark up their domain charges at all. So .com domains are about $8.50 US dollars instead of $20 like it is at GoDaddy and other places. And so let's look at what we need to do next. Now we have the same thing happening with the domain as it was before, but now since we have it running through Cloudflare, we're able to make instant changes, and we're able to connect to my GridPane hosting account directly using this DNS API integration, so that I can go through a process of adding this domain and adding a new WordPress website to import the other website into when I make my migration. And I can do that with the SSL certificates already enabled and my staging site active too. So what I'm going to be doing is moving and migrating the site from the SiteGround host over to GridPane into the staging area that I have set up. And then I can go ahead and update plugins and themes. I can do testing to make sure that the site at the new staging area works and everything. This is all while the old site is still live at SiteGround in the background. And so once I do all that testing at staging at GridPane, then all I need to do is click one button, staging to live. I'll push it to live at GridPane. And then once that's finished, I can go back into Cloudflare and I can attach the new IP address to this A record and make the website point to the new place in GridPane. That's after I've done all my testing and everything. And so the first change we've made, as you recall, is just to go ahead and take the website itself and look at where it's actually hosted. Okay, we know it's hosted at SiteGround, and we figured out where the domain name was registered and how it was pointing traffic. It was using name servers to point directly to SiteGround. And so I've left the domain name registered at register.com because my client is paying for that themselves. But I changed the name servers to point those to Cloudflare so that we can get an instant change later and so that I can connect that to GridPane. We also finally found that there were no email addresses to deal with, so we didn't have to deal with trying to move or migrate hosted website emails at that domain name anywhere, which I've done videos on this in the past. They're on the Leverage WP YouTube channel as well as at leveragewp.com, but we didn't need to do that in this case. And so now that I've moved the DNS records over to Cloudflare, I'm going to go over to Site Tools and over here under SiteGround and just make sure that I have a restorable backup system, and hopefully more than one, that I could use in case I run into any issues. And so just looking at what I have for the current website hosted at SiteGround, if I look under Security and open up Backups, one thing I have set up are daily backups that are included with my SiteGround cloud hosting plan. And so these are restorable directly into SiteGround again in case something happens to the original hosting account. And so I know that these restorable backups are here. And I just also want to point out, if I look under the WordPress website dashboard for hopefarmshtx.org, I'm also using Updraft Plus Backups, the free plugin, which is a great plugin for automated backups and offsite backups. So for this one, the way I have it set up, if I look under settings, is that I take a weekly backup and I retain 2 backups, both the files and the database. That's restorable easily back into the website through the WordPress dashboard. And I have the remote storage of Dropbox set up. So in my Dropbox account, I keep 2 files, backup sets that I can restore offsite in case the server goes down or anything. And so if I look at backup and restore, if I wanted to, I could back up now and save a backup or make sure that that's saved at my Dropbox account to make sure I have the most current backup I need. I know that this site hasn't been updated and back only a few days ago I have a current update here. You can also do that at SiteGround and at many hosts. You have your managed, daily backups in this case, but you can always create a new backup right here by naming it and clicking create, and then you can download that file or it can be saved on the server like they'll do, and you can get it through the file manager if you want to do that. So I'm pretty confident the backups that I already have here saved in my Dropbox account, and I also don't foresee any issues with making a copy and migrating this website over. And so I feel confident that I have current enough backups to work with. And now that I also have hopefarmshtx.org in my Cloudflare account and the DNS is working, now I'm just going to go into GridPane and I'm going to add this site into one of my servers and basically create a fresh blank WordPress site at GridPane in order to bring and migrate the site in from the SiteGround server to my server at GridPane. So I'm just going to get the domain correct. I'm setting up hopefarmshtx.org. not .com. Make sure the domain that you're using is correct, hopefarmshtx.org. There we go. I'm going to select one of my servers. I'm going to put it on the Vultr Client 1 server. I'm going to auto create a system user and a randomly generated password for that. That's for accessing the files via an FTP program here at my GridPane servers. I'm going to go ahead and use my standard name and email. Leave everything here as I have for the defaults. I'm not going to set up caching or a web application firewall yet until it's already installed and working. And I will go ahead and set outgoing email just because I'll generally use my SendGrid account for initially setting up sites, and then if I'm going to expand the outgoing transactional email settings at the website, I'll set those up after. But this will make sure that there's a working email system once we do the migration. I'm going to use the primary domain SSL and use my API integration that I have with Cloudflare, and I'm going to use my own key that I have, my API key set up already within GridPane. And I do want to click staging site because I want to build the WordPress site here and make a staging copy, because that's where I'm going to be migrating the website in using the Delicious Brains migration plugin. So I'm just going to click add site. And now GridPane in the background is building the software stack that they have worked out and built as really the most high performance WordPress server installation of software that can be found these days. One of the best things that I love about GridPane is the software stack is the fastest in the business, as well as it's also fully transparent. So you buy your own server infrastructure at whatever level that you want, and you know exactly what resources are being used and when you need to add or subtract resources if you need to from any servers. It's also super easy to clone websites from one server to another, and do one-click staging back and forth and everything. And so as you can see, I'm getting some integration and site build notices here in GridPane. And the last thing that I'll wait for to happen is to have the SSL certificate built, and it'll give me a success message after that. So as I look, I can just go ahead and look under Hope Farms. I can search, and it's already going and live. It looks like everything is finished. So if I open up this active site, if I look under domains, SSL certificate is on. Yep, I'm getting a successfully updated message up here. And okay, so it is still setting up the SSL certificates like I expected. So I'll just go back to my GridPane screen right here and wait for the final notice for SSL certificates. I can also go up here and look at staging, and I can just make sure that it's created a staging.hopefarmshtx.org at the same server. Yep. And here's my buttons for taking the live site to staging and taking staging to live. Now it looks like the SSL certificate has been provisioned, and success. All right, now this is the message I was waiting for. The database rewrites are complete. I like when it says thanks for your patience. You can close this and the previous notifications. And so this shows that the site has completed. And now under staging at GridPane, I can go in and log in with single sign-on just by clicking the little WordPress logo there. It's going to open another tab and log me in as the administrator in the staging version of this new WordPress website. Basically, GridPane just created two brand new fresh sites. It created one at the domain name hopefarmshtx.org, and it also created a whole nother site, another site at the staging domain name, as you see here. And so because I have WooCommerce subscriptions installed, even though it's not activated, it tells me that, oh, you know what, I've opened the wrong the wrong domain name, which I'll often do. Look at that. I opened the leverage WP instead of Hope Farms HTX. So let's hit the correct button. If you hit the W WordPress logo, it will log you into, now there it is, a fresh version 6.0 installation of WordPress, and nothing is really here yet. But because I am going to use the Delicious Brains WP Migrate plugin, which is really, really excellent, it likes to go from one domain to a different domain, which is live on the internet. And so for my purposes, I found it easiest to migrate sites into the staging area first, and then within GridPane do all my work at the staging area, making sure everything's updated and testing. And then I can click this blue button, Staging to Live, which will do a server test and then copy the staging copy that I've tested over to the live site. And then we can go ahead and take the DNS and point it to the new server at GridPane. And in that way, we can migrate the site with absolutely zero downtime. And so the next thing we need to do here is install let's install the migration plugin into both sites, both the live Hope Farm site here and also over here at staging. One thing I'm noticing is that the staging has a not secure message right here. And so one thing I'll do is under GridPane, I'll go and open the control panel for this staging site and go over to domains. And then I do want to enable SSL for the staging as well as for the regular website. And that way I won't have any, browser messages or browser errors that say, the staging, this site is not secure or anything like that. You can work in regular HTTP versus HTTPS. But again, this might take just a minute or three for my final message to come up. And then as you'll see, I'll need to go over here and it'll log me out most likely because it will redirect to a secure version of the WordPress dashboard. And it'll force me to log back in again after I enable the SSL here. So this is the process, just waiting a couple of minutes. And what I can do in the meantime is go to the live site here at hopefarmshtx.org and go ahead and install my migration plugins. So I'm going to go to Add New under Plugins and Upload Plugin, and then on my computer I'm going to go ahead and find it. So under Delicious Brains, I've got the Migrate DB WP Migrate plugin file. It's a zip file that I can just go ahead and click Install. And there used to be a couple of add-ons for this where you would be able to bring in the media files and the theme and plugin files as well as the database. And now they've combined those all together. So I'll click Activate Plugin, and this is a paid plugin. And so I'll need to find my license key and go ahead and enter it here. Let's see where... There's the, it's called WP Migrate down under here. I can click enter my license key here or click settings. And just on this settings page here under, yeah, it's right here under settings. Down here would be where I'd paste my license key. And so let's just go ahead and check on GridPane here. It looks like everything has been completed. Thanks for your patience. You can close this and the previous notifications. Great. And so you can see that the SSL appears to be installed on the staging. And if I go back here, if I click home, it may force me to log back in again, which is true. So I'm just going to go and close that tab and open GridPane again and click the single sign-on button. And that'll open the tab again and allow me to be logged in as the administrator here. And so there's where I'll also install the migration plugin under Plugins, Add New as well. First things first though, let's go to deliciousbrains.com and to my account, and I'm gonna log in and then go under licenses. And then this WP Migrate plugin, there's my license key. I'll just click copy and I can go back into the live Hope Farms, paste and activate my license key. And once that's in there, this little indicator should just stop spinning. And that shows that I'm activated my license key there. So I'll do the same thing over here in the new staging site at hopefarmshtx.org. Now this is at the new server, and I'm going to be installing these plugins here. But while I'm here, it just makes me think we should just, this is a staging site at the new server at GridPane, and if I look under sites and look for Hope Farms, just find the Hope Farms HTX and look at the IP. It's 66.42 something something. And so let's look at the DNS records at Cloudflare and just refresh that, because since GridPane is connected via API to my Cloudflare account, it has created the staging subdomain for the staging site, and you can look here, it has this IP address, the 6642. And that's why this actual URL is working. Even though the regular Hope Farms HTX URL is actually over here at the original site still. It's still over here at this URL. That one is going to, now this should probably show the Cloudflare. It's still showing the SiteGround IP address, but when the DNS migrates across the internet, that will show into this Cloudflare domain IP address right here. But that is why the staging is working for us, and the original is also working for the public. This A record that goes to this IP address, and the C name, which goes to hopefarmshtx.org, this A record, which goes here, is still at the original SiteGround IP address. And so that's why that's working. So next step, let's go into the staging site here and do that same thing. We'll add the plugin. I'll upload this plugin. It's the WP Migrate. I'll click install, and I can activate the plugin here at the staging site. And I'll do the same things. I can click enter license key. Brings it right there. I still have it on the clipboard. So I'll just click activate license. And now that those two plugins are activated at each of the sites, I can go ahead and start the process of migrating from one to the other. And so I want to give the permissions here. So under settings, again, in WP Migrate, I want permission. This is the staging site. So I want to give permission to to push data to this install. If you read these, that's what's explaining which direction you're trying to go. And so I'm going to click and turn on the push toggle icon here. That I want to process requests to push data to this install, overwriting its data. And that's what I want. This staging site is just a blank WordPress installation. You can see, there's no pages in here except for what comes with WordPress, just the sample page and the privacy policy. And so, if I go under Tools, WP Migrate back here, the settings I want to be able to push data to this install, overwriting what's already here. And then I want to do the opposite at the other website. So now here at the original website, I want to process requests to pull data from this install and copy it elsewhere. And so I'm going to go back to WP Migrate here at the staging site, and I'm going to click the Migrate tab. And what I want to do is replace this site. It's at staging. Just verify you're going the right direction. And I want to click pull. And so it's asking for this remote site connection info that I need to paste here, the site URL and secret key. That's provided from the same plugin on the other site. So here under settings, right here, I can click copy to clipboard, and then I'll go back, and this is what gives these two plugins installed on two different websites, permission to go ahead and talk to each other. And so there's the remote site. That's correct. And what I want to do is I want the whole database. Generally, I'll leave all these settings to their defaults. It's already found the file server location structure here, and it's doing a database replace the way it needs to, because in SiteGround it goes home, customer, www, the web address, and then public HTML. Whereas in GridPane, it sees it needs to be var/ww/staging dot and then htdocs. And so it will generally find exactly what you need, and you won't need to change anything. And then I'm going to click, I want to bring the media files, all media files. I want to bring the theme files. And I might as well, I know I need Divi and Divi child, but I don't need to bring these across. And so I could say, I just want to pull only the selected themes if I want to. And 2021, 22, I don't need. And then the plugin files, I'm going to go ahead and do that same thing. Pull all plugins except there's one that I don't want to pull. And that's let's see, which one is it? The SiteGround Optimizer. That's a server plugin that SiteGround provides to help your caching and some other functions within SiteGround. And if I don't pull that across, that way I won't need to just deactivate it or anything once I get there. So I have all those. I'm pulling all the plugins except those selected, and all my other selections above are selected correctly. And at the bottom, I can just click pull. And so if we watch this happening now, it's going to first do all the tables, and then it's going to, this is the whole database, then it's going to pull all the media files, then it pulls the theme files, and then the plugin files. And it also goes in sections. It will give you a progress bar for each piece, and it'll tell you when each of these pieces is finished. And I've rarely, if ever, gotten any kind of error happening with pulling a website and migrating using this Delicious Brains migrating plugin. I love it. There are some other ones that are very good. The all-in-one WP Migration is another good migrations plugin that works quite well. And I have used the Duplicator Pro plugin in the past, although it's fairly complex. It does work, but it's got some kind of more complicated ways that it works versus these. And there's another one finally that I've used very successfully. It's called Migrate Guru. And in some scenarios, depending on your hosting of the original or the site where you're migrating to, the Migrate Guru might be a better way to go than one that's a plugin based one like this one from Delicious Brains, WP Migrate, as well as the all-in-one WP Migration plugin. Those sometimes don't work in certain server scenarios, and Migrate Guru works a little bit differently because it uses the power of their servers to bring the site from one site, to the other site, and one server to the other server, or from one host to the other host. And so there's a few good suggestions, as sometimes you'll need alternatives to certain migration systems. Okay, and so we can keep looking at the progress here. Right now it's done all the tables. It's moving the media files, and it looks like we have quite a large number of media files. I probably need to go troubleshoot that a little bit. My client has likely loaded up the media library with 1.16 gigabytes of media files, but the power of these plugins and how it chunks the different processes that it uses for the migration is showing its strength here. I haven't paused the video or anything, but in just the last minute or so, it's already pulled 3/4 of what it needs as far as media files. And we should be done with this in just a few minutes. So we'll let this go. As this goes, this is really pulling all the data from the entire original server on the website over to the new server here, the new site here at GridPane. And one thing to note when you're doing a migration, in almost every case, you'll end up with your login credentials being different when you pull it into the new host or new website location. Because it pulled everything, the entire website, an exact copy from one server here at SiteGround to an additional different server here at GridPane, it made a copy of it. The site credentials are no longer associated with the fresh WordPress install here at GridPane, but the login credentials that you'll need to use are the ones from the original site that I pulled here from SiteGround. And so some people get confused with that. Here's the original login credentials. You know, my username is the same, but the password will be different. And you can use GridPane's a single sign-on here under staging to get and log in, whether you know the login credentials or not. And that's another one of the beauties of using GridPane as a website host and site manager. So you can just go ahead and have it log in for you, you know, when you click the little W logo, the little WordPress logo for single sign-on here. And so let's see where we are here. We're getting pretty fast now in third and fourth stages. Theme files are going a lot faster than the media files did. You know, another great thing about doing a migration like this is that this Delicious Brains WP Migrate plugin, it moves the files from one server directly to the new hosting server. It doesn't force you to download the backup file and then upload it again in the, you know, at the new host. That is the way that the you know, some of those other plugin-based migration plugins work. All-in-one WP Migration has you download the site file and a certain file type that they own called WPress.wpress. And then you take that file and you upload it using the plugin to the new site. And if your site is too large, then that plugin has a paid upgrade that you can use. It does work for large sites in that way. But I do prefer this Delicious Brains site. It's very, very reliable, and really as reliable as it gets as far as migration plugins. And I've tested quite a lot of them. So I know this is taking a few minutes. It gives me a timer here up at the right-hand side that you can see too. 5 minutes and 38 seconds to bring almost, I think, 2 gigs worth. If you look at the site tools here, these backups, let's see if we go to the dashboard, the disk space that's being used, including backups and everything here at SiteGround, is 2 gigabytes, which is pretty large. I find that GridPane doesn't use near as much as far as the way that they store their backups. And the backups at GridPane are much more well done than any other host that I've seen as well. So we're complete. Here at the staging site, we've done this pull. It called it 1.33 gigs of data because likely it didn't move the backup files over. But now, look at that, right there, it logged me out because the session expired and the password has changed because the site is now it's got the original password from Hope Farms here. So let's see, I wonder, yeah, I have it saved in my browser. I'm going to use this original login information that was associated with the original site at SiteGround. But now I'm here logged into the site at GridPane under the staging subdomain, staging.hopefarmshtx.org. And so I can go ahead and close that. I can do a test here where I can, it's loading a profile. Okay. There's an unsaved profile. So if you do migrations or you want to save and keep this migration plugin active, you can just say, okay, I'll save this migration profile. It basically just saved the pull from hopefarmshtx.org. As far as if I wanted to, save all my settings and then redo this migration if necessary, if something didn't work and I wanted to just go ahead and overwrite the site once again. And here's where I'll make all my checks. So, I can go to Visit Site and I'll right-click and open in a new tab. And we can see how the site looks. Just verify that my domain is right, the staging subdomain. And the homepage looks great. Everything seems to be working. So far so good. This is generally my experience, that as you click through and after a migration with the Delicious Brains WP Migrate plugin, everything's just exactly the same. Now, buttons and everything, it goes in there and it changes your URLs in the database. And so all of these URLs in the navigation menu are correct, which isn't always the case when you're working with migration plugins. But I love that this really works. As I click each one, you can see it's going to the staging subdomain. So make sure when you're testing, that you keep verifying that you're going to the correct URL and it doesn't point, back to the original site here at the original URL. And then you're like, oh, it works, but you're at the original URL, you're at the old server. So make sure you stay on the new server as you go from page to page. And you can just do some checks as far as the different content and look at the links down in the far left side of the bottom of the browser. You can see where those URLs are going to go, and everything seems to be working great. And so that's really as far as I need to go. I really think that because this site is working, let's see, Updraft Plus will still work and bring backups of this site to my Dropbox account that's already been being set up. And really, so the last stage, there's a couple more things to do. Now that I know that the staging site is working, let's just take a look at the blog real quick just to make sure it's pulling dynamically. Blog posts, yep, and comments form looks to be working. This looks great. So now that I can verify that the staging subdomain is working and looks exactly like the website itself over here at the regular URL, now I can go back here to GridPane and I can say, okay, now I know that staging.hopefarmshtx.org is working. I can go over here and click Staging to Live. And so it will make some checks here. Here's what you want to verify. First, that the source is correct. Yes, I'm moving from staging. The destination is correct, hopefarmshtx.org. Now, I can't go and look right now because hopefarmshtx.org still points to the original website. But all I'm doing is copying it over to the GridPane version of the hopefarmshtx.org domain name and website. And so we'll do all files and complete database. And when I click push staging to live, it does this pre-staging to live checklist. It just wants to make sure that the server environment in all these categories is the same. And it'll give you a warning with a red X if it's not the same. And then you can say go back and change. It's always a good idea when you do a migration to match the server environment so that everything is the same and it'll be an exact copy of the staging site to the live site. And so I'm going to click push staging to live, and depending on the size of the site, this one being a little bit bigger, 1.33 gigs, it may take a little bit of time. I suspect that this is going to take about 5 minutes to do a complete migration from the staging subdomain to the regular domain at GridPane in the background. And it does all the database updates as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video at this point and let the GridPane software do its work in the background, copying the staging site to the live server URL at GridPane. And then I'll show you how you can quickly go in and just make sure that that live site is really, really working before you do the last step and point the DNS records to bring public traffic over to the new server. Well, that was very quick. As soon as I pressed the pause button on the video, the staging push was completed. You can see here in my GridPane account under active staging sites where I clicked staging to live. First, it gave me this green message, the staging push was started. Now it says staging push completed. And so I'm going to do one last thing, and that is to make sure that this site is actually working. And here's where one thing you could do is, at the original site, one thing I'll often do is I'll just go and because we're using Divi, I'm just going to go into one of the pages. I'm just going to make a very small, not noticeable content change. I'll usually go in here and find somewhere like at the end of a paragraph or something like that. I'm going to go ahead and enable the visual builder. Now, keep in mind, I'm on the original site. I haven't moved the DNS records yet to bring public traffic over to the new site yet. And that's what I'm testing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up this editing window, and really I'm just going to go to the bottom on the mission page. I'm just going to change from a period to an exclamation point. not something that would really affect anyone's experience of the website, but something that I can notice so that I can make sure and test and know from the front end of the website which is the website that I'm looking at, so that I know for sure that it's the old server or the new server. And so if I exit the Visual Builder now, if we look at the bottom of this paragraph, it's an exclamation point after locally grown food. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log out of the original website, and I'm going to close those tabs, and I'm going to open up, let's see, now here's the staging website. And so it doesn't matter what I do here as far as I can still be logged in at staging. But right now, since the DNS is pointing public traffic to the SiteGround site, I'm going to go ahead and make a hosts file change here on my local computer, just to make and do one more test to make sure that the staging to live push that I just did worked properly. And so in Windows is a particular way that you do this, and you're really changing the same file if you're on a Mac computer. And again, I have a tutorial about using the hosts file at the Leverage WordPress YouTube channel, as well as at leveragewp.com. But here's how I do it on my Windows machine. I'll go ahead and I'm over here down on my other screen in Windows. I'm using the search, and I'm starting to type Notepad. I'm going to right click on the Notepad icon before I start the program, and I'm clicking Run as Administrator. And so it just opened up the Notepad that you see here on the screen, and you just do need to be logged in as the administrator using Notepad. And so to review, again, what I did was I used, I right-clicked on the Notepad icon or the word Notepad before I started the program, and then I clicked Run as Administrator. And that was the important part. You want to click Run as Administrator, and then Notepad will open. And so now that I'm running Notepad as the administrator, it lets me click File, Open, and access a particular place inside of Windows. And so here's where it is. It's Windows C:, or just the hard drive on your computer, which oftentimes on Windows is C:. And then in that C: hard drive, you click the Windows folder, and inside that folder is System32, then drivers, and then a folder called etc. And so I'll just go back and show you how I would do this if you're not already navigated here. I'm going to click Windows and C:, and then I'll double click the Windows folder. Inside here, I want to go to System32, double click that, then I'll go down to D and click drivers, and then the etc folder. Now, one thing you'll find is that it'll generally, because Notepad is designed for text documents initially, you need to open up all files next to the file name here in the dropdown to show you these hidden files. And the one file we're looking to open is called hosts. So you open hosts by double clicking it or clicking it once and then clicking open. And then here's where, this stuff at the top is the default content right to here, where it defines this 127.0.0.1 IP address is generally what Windows uses as localhost. Down below, you might see some other things, like if you've used a local development environment on your computer before, like desktop server, or something like Laragon I've used, as well as local by Flywheel. It might have some host file entries in here for different sites you've set up locally on your computer. But if not, you just go below the the last line that says localhost, anywhere where there's an open space, and you can put the right IP address. And so what I want to do is go back to GridPane and say, okay, my Hope Farms website is at this IP address. So I just click there to copy to the clipboard, and then let me open up Notepad once again. And inside the host file, I just paste the IP address first, and then a space or a tab, and then the URL. htx.org. What we're doing here, and usually I'll use a hash and then that's just a comment so that the computer doesn't read this next comment. It's just for humans. I'll just put a hash and then you can put like, the name of the server or whatever you want. I could put GridPane and Vultr Client 1 as the name of the server here. So I could just do that. And now when I click File, Save, that little asterisk from up here in the host file goes away. And now if I go to Hope Farms, let's see. This is why I made that little change. Sometimes the browser will remember and show you a cached version that it already remembers in the background, and you won't be looking at the correct server. I've also found that even this IP detection plugin that I use, extension for Chrome, is kind of behind depending on what information it's looking at. So you can't really trust that to show you what server you're looking at. That's why I made that little change. And so I need to go to About Us and Mission. That's the page where I changed the period into an exclamation point. And you can see that it's an exclamation point. So my changes that I made in the hosts file have not propagated into my operating system yet. Oftentimes, I'll either close the tab or even close the Chrome browser itself. One thing you might do is, I'll just go to Hope Farms HTX one more time, just maybe open it, or if I hadn't closed it up, then I would refresh or reload the page. Let me look down here. Oops. Let me go to Mission again, and still got that exclamation point. So here's another thing I could do. I could click Inspect there. I right-clicked anywhere on the page, and I opened the Chrome Dev Tools. You can also get there by using the three dots up here, and under More Tools, you can open Developer Tools. And I just closed them. And so that's where I can go to More Tools and Developer Tools. And then once the developer tools are open, you can right click on reload, and you can do a hard reload, which is to empty the cache, or to not use the cache, but actually go to the server and find the page, or even empty the cache and hard reload. And let's see, did that change where? Nope, I still have that exclamation point. And so here's something that we might try. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to my own face here, and I'm going to close the browser. So I'm over here on my other, I'm looking over here on my other screen, and I'm going to click Close on the browser. So I've now closed out of Chrome, all the windows of Chrome that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and open Chrome again. And let's just take a look. I'll go over to my screen again. And I went to hopefarmshtx.org, and now it's opening up, and let's see. No, it still has that exclamation point, so I'm still not getting to. Now another, clearing the cache, I need to, let's see, I can reload the page one more time. See if I have that exclamation point. Yep, it's still there. So now let me close Chrome again. And you know what I might try is open Firefox Developer, a different browser. I have it over here on my other screen. So let me, what was that? I closed it by accident. So let me bring it back over to the screen. Okay. There we go. So this is the Firefox Developer Edition browser. There we go. Let's see what happens. homefarmshtx.org. And I'll go to the mission page. Now that's showing a period. So Chrome was holding on to some cached version of the page. So now I can see that this is the new version at GridPane. Another thing that I could do, And this just can show you how, if you are able to log in. Now, how can I know that this is not at SiteGround but at GridPane? Remember, I didn't bring the plugin called SiteGround Optimizer over. And I can look, yep, it says that the SG Cache Press, that's the SiteGround Optimizer, the plugin does not exist. So there was a listing in the database about it, but you can see it would be under S's, it would be called SiteGround Optimizer, and it's not there. So I know that I'm at the new server. Another way that I know as well that I'm at GridPane is that when I install a new WordPress website at GridPane, by default it brings in two plugins that it uses in the caching system and in the GridPane software stack. And so the GridPane Redis Object Cache is one plugin, and the Nginx Helper for the Nginx cache and Redis cache is here as well. And coming over from the staging site, there's a plugin called Force Login that's used to make sure that the staging site can't be listed by Google or found in search or anything like that when you're working on your staging sites. It just forces the admin user at WordPress to be logged in. And so I know that I'm looking here at the original, the new website at the GridPane host. And here's where I can do some testing. I'm logged in. I can just go ahead and just make sure all the pages look right and the images are in, and things are looking right and loading. Even this interactive magazine that we have embedded here, the go to top, the donate button goes to the donate page. Great. All right. So everything seems to be working. There's nothing wrong with this. And now, so I'm looking at the original URL, but I'm spoofing it in a way. I'm fooling my browser into thinking that this is the real URL. The only way, the only thing that's left is to bring the public, back into being able to see the real website. Now, I just want to do a test here. I just need to change the DNS settings, is what I was saying. But let's see if, I restarted Chrome a couple of times. Let's see if it caught up to, it caught up to being able to work and being affected by, so Chrome sometimes hangs on to, cached versions of the page, even after you close it and reopen it, which is funny, which oftentimes is why I use two different browsers. Here I have the Firefox Developer Edition browser is working correctly with the hosts file, and Chrome is still seeing the original site. And I can just wait for that to happen. Oftentimes Chrome, just all of a sudden when you restart it, will come back again. And so here, we're looking at Chrome right now. You can see that on the mission page, it's got the exclamation point. I'll just try one more time to hit inspect and then right click, empty the cache and hard reload. No, it's still got it there. So Chrome is hanging on to some kind of background cache. But if we look here, the Hope Farms HTX mission page here in the Firefox Developer Edition is showing, no exclamation point. And when we were logged in here, you can also see that under plugins, one of the things that I'll always do too is activate the two GridPane plugins. And since these GridPane plugins are here and the SiteGround caching plugin is absent, I know that I'm looking at the new website here at the new server at GridPane. Just take one more look now that I've enabled the caching plugins. Again, looks great. Okay, so last thing, I'm just going to open up a Chrome window. I'm going to go back to Cloudflare and log in. Let's see. Oh, I've got to open my one. Just let me, I use one password. So placing my password in there. Nice and secure with Cloudflare. And then we'll go under websites. I'll go to hopefarmshtx.org, and under DNS, the last thing for me to do is to take this IP address, and I can find that at GridPane. See if it kept me logged in. Yeah, it did. So Chrome knows I'm logged in here. But if I go to the Vultr client, and in fact, I can just verify that I have the right IP address under sites. I can search for Hope Farms, and then, okay, there's the IP address. So I'm sure that's the correct IP address, and it is this one anyway. But so I'll bring this, I'll edit this A record. Now at Cloudflare, different than SiteGround, instead of just printing the URL, you just use the @ symbol for root. A lot of servers use this, and I'm going to replace this IP address with that one and click Save. And that's done. So because Cloudflare is so tightly connected to the domain registry and the trunk line of the internet, DNS changes at Cloudflare are generally instant. And so even though, I've spoofed it, now, let's go back to my hosts file. I'm going to go ahead and put a comment tag in front of this line and click File Save. And then I'll close that. And so then if we look under, if we go to this same URL in Chrome, now let's just see, we'll look at that same place under About Us Mission. There, no more exclamation points. So now not only am I being directed to the new version of the website at GridPane, but the public is being directed there as well. That is a complete migration. Let's just, out of curiosity, let's see what this now, the DNSlytics IP tracker, this IP address and domain information utility still shows this SiteGround IP address, but over here I'm getting some differences. So now I'm starting to see some different A records. This has to do with Cloudflare. The domain DNS does take a little while to run its course through the internet, and so these might take a little time to change, but real traffic is going to the new site no matter what browser you have, and it's looking great. So I have a full migration over to GridPane. What I'll do now is just over at SiteGround, I will keep the site live for a few days to a week, just to make sure that if there are any issues with the new server or anything like that, that that I can take care of those things. There's a couple things I'm going to turn on at this point at the new server. And so let's go back to my screen. A couple final changes within GridPane here at hopefarmshtx.org. I've gone in and I do have an outgoing email provider. So if somebody fills out the contact form, the outgoing email is working through my SendGrid SMTP provider. I have that set up in GridPane already, so I can use it when needed for all of my sites. But then under caching, I'm going to go ahead and turn on page caching and give that just a moment. It'll give me a message that it's been updated. And I'm also going to turn on Redis object caching. The system I use for all of my websites at GridPane are the Nginx Redis page caching on, and then object caching by Redis as well. And then once that has been turned on at the server, I can close these messages. I can close these down. Now I can go into, I'm just going to log in to the WordPress dashboard again. Now I know that I'm at the original site. I can go into plugins, and I showed you before that those two caching plugins are here. And I'm going to go into the GridPane Redis object cache settings. actually first into the Nginx helper, and I'm going to enable purge, and I'm going to choose Redis cache, which is the one I have set up on the server. Leave everything as the defaults and click Save Changes. And now I can go into Redis object cache, and it looks like it's already enabled because I enabled it on the server level. And I don't really need to do anything. You could save changes if you made any changes. But now the cache is set up. I'll also go back into Pages, and I could just go in this way if I want to. And let's see, I wanted to go under About Mission. And just bring the typography back to what it was before to get rid of that exclamation point. I'll just click Build on the front end. Now I do have a staging copy ready to go so that I can go through and do some of these plugin theme updates and WordPress update if I want to or need to after the fact, now that I've done this testing. But let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and open up this module and change my you know what? The exclamation point didn't need to be changed back because that was on the original site. The new site's back to the period, so I can exit the visual builder. I'll just discard because I didn't make any changes. And then there was one more server change to do where if I open up Hope Farms HTX, now on the Vultr Client 1 server, I know that I have backups set up on certain websites. Other websites, I have them on the 10s, and I'm going to set up an automated local backups by the hour. And instead of on the 10, I'm going to do it on the 05 because I know that that's a slot not taken. What that means is that when I do hourly backups, I don't tax the server by doing every site that I have on this server at the same time. And so I'll just update that. And now this is creating hourly backups, you know, and saving them for the week, weekly backups, saving them for the month, monthly backups, saving them for a year, and after a year, discarding those backup files, which are really, really well saved in a way that saves a lot of disk space. And I already do have Updraft Plus sending remote backups to my Dropbox. But I can also do a third remote backup setup. Once I enable this at the Vultr server, I could create automated backups now with GridPane that send to my Dropbox. And so I can click Dropbox and I'll put it in this folder, or I can create another folder if I want to. And I can say add remote storage. Okay, so I'm adding remote storage for this website to my Dropbox. And on a schedule of, for this one, I'm just going to do, oh no, you know what? I've been doing daily on this one and weekly on the plugin backups. And so that's what makes a very, very robust and a backed up and redundant backup system, I should say. And so daily backups, you know, right at midnight, or, you know, when should we do them? A time when the website is not being used very much, doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect public visitors. But if I say 3 in the morning, then that's going to be, just Hope Farms HTX. I can click update. Oh, and if I wanted to make a backup right now to Dropbox, I totally could. I could just put that on that schedule. I'll put it on this schedule. And these are easily restorable backups. So now at hopefarmshtx.org, I have 3 automated backups going, all that are restorable so that I can get back this website from 3 different locations. 2 of them are off-site at my Dropbox account, and 1 is here at GridPane. And so it's an amazing system for both the most high-performance website hosting you can get, and the most modular as far as moving sites around to different servers, as well as the most robust backup system, both the on-site or local backups, you would say, that I take every hour, and then I take daily backups to Dropbox from this system, and then I use a plugin to do weekly backups to Dropbox as well. And so there was the completion of a site migration from SiteGround to GridPane for this hopefarmshtx.org website. Like I mentioned, we did not have email to deal with, and we had a little bit of finagling to do with the domain name, bringing that DNS management over to Cloudflare. And, I don't need, now that this is not at SiteGround anymore, I don't need any of this, the FTP, a record, this mail or SSH or webmail, all going back to this 35208 IP address. That's all left over from SiteGround. So after my week has expired, I'll leave myself a note to go and just remove all the old records that were associated with SiteGround. And the only ones I need to leave are the A record for the website itself, the staging record for the GridPane website, the CNAME that does the www pointing to the original domain, and that's it, because we don't have any email set up. These are all for email that was set up by default at SiteGround. And then all these others that point to 35208 are different things that SiteGround uses on their control panel to connect things that you might need, like webmail, etc. GridPane works differently. They don't use the DNS records, much more powerful system, so we don't need to change that. But that would be my last step, and we're finished. We have a working website, probably running much faster, and I can get it off my old SiteGround hosting account that I'm in the process of shutting down, which will save me about $1,500 a year once I get that server shut down, my SiteGround cloud server that I used to use. And so I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I know it was quite detailed, but maybe you can use it as a reference and help you in your own site migrations for client sites or your own. See you next time.